Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I am Marcia Weeks, and you're watching the Marcia Weeks Show. And we're coming to you live from Barbados, beautiful Barbados, right here in the Caribbean. And of course, we're coming to you live also on Carib Vision, which broadcasts into 16 different Caribbean countries. And we are an addition to 246 Bajan Vibes, which is an online radio online which is an online radio station, and they have a call-in program which I'm telling you is taking Barbados by storm. Although it is they're broadcasting from the UK. So we just want to welcome our Bajan Vibes family that might be watching right now, and those who are watching from Carib Vision. Now, today we are going to be talking about the Summit of the Americas. And, there's a lot of controversy there because, as you know, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines wrote a letter to the other CARICOM members advising them of, boycotting the Summit of the Americas, which is actually happening right now as we speak in LA. And so we want to talk about that today. And so I'm going to ask you to share. I think this is something that's very important to the Caribbean region. And as a Caribbean woman, this is important because we want to look at what does this mean for the Caribbean. Was there a boycott? I mean, it's happening. So it seems like there was no boycott. And what does this mean? With some members of CARICOM invited, some members of the Americas invited, and some not invited. We're going to look at that, and we have two very important journalists in the Caribbean who will be with us today. But before we go into that, as you know, we've been carrying updates on the government industrial school saga here in Barbados, where there have been accusations or allegations of abuse by some of the wards of the government industrial school in Barbados. And there is a group called Women in Action, and they have they've been asking the minister, Wilfred Abrams, for updates. And today is actually the deadline. They gave them, Wilfred Abrams, a 5-day deadline on giving an update on these wards that were taken to the psychiatric hospital. And the public really wants to know what's happening with our young people, what's happening to them. And so we have a spokesperson for Women in Action with us today, Ms. Tempu Nefatari. Hi, Tempu. How are you doing today?
Greetings, Marcia. I'm well. A warm good afternoon to your audience across the world. Happy to see you again.
Yes, great to see you again. And thank you for the work. I see in the newspaper that you guys are present, and you're challenging what's happening out there. And I'm like, yeah, go Women in Action. Can you give us an update on what's happening with Women in Action?
Well, Women in Action, we are in action, Marcia, in more than one way. So we are advocating for these changes in the juvenile justice system. But at present, we are also working with some of the former wards of the government industrial school. These are young girls who have reached out to us for assistance. And I'm going to, at the end of my segment here, just going to share a bit more about that with the audience. But Marcia, what is ahead of us now, what is in our faces, is the failure of the minister.
Temple, let me ask you to do something for me and see if I can help with your audio. Could you turn off your camera and see if I will help with your audio? Because we want to hear what you have to say. Just welcome Steve.
Say that again.
And all those who are on that and see well, or it could be that I'm not seeing her anymore. I think she and we were trying to give an update on what is happening here in Barbados with the Women in Action and the Government Industrial School. But we seem to be having some technical challenges there. Steve Moore, are you hearing me clearly? Can someone tell me if you're hearing me clearly? Very important for us today as we go on. Are you hearing me clearly, Steve Moore? Can someone let me know if you're hearing me clearly? Is there anybody else out there can let me know if you're hearing me clearly? Okay, Miss Temple is back with us, and let's try this again. So Temple, welcome back, and you were telling us what's happening with Women in Action.
Yes, thank you, Marcia. I hope I'm a lot clearer now. Are you hearing me
Yes,
well?
I'm hearing you.
Okay, yes. So I'm saying that we, like you earlier mentioned, we asked, well, it had reached a stage where we really demanded of the minister an update on the well-being of those girls who were reported as being on suicide watch at the psychiatric hospital some weeks ago.
Yes.
And we also wanted to know what was the rehabilitative um, care being given to those girls. And Marcia, we have not heard a peep from the minister. He has
Mm,
not even graced us with, well, I am busy this week. Let me get back to you in 4 days or 5 days. He has totally gone mute on our demand for an update. And Marcia, the thing about it is that we are not being unreasonable. That would not be considered unreasonable given the seriousness of the allegations that we
yes.
have heard from the former wards and even some staff members of the
Mhm.
government industrial school. We have a right to be paying attention to these things. We can't
Yes.
turn a deaf ear to them. So I don't think we're being unreasonable at all. And this is why I want
Mhm.
the public to understand that, you see, if we don't demand accountability, then we are basically saying to the minister in this case that you're free to handle this as you please. You're
Mm,
free to do as you choose. You have no responsibility to us. But we are demanding that update in light of the seriousness of the allegations that we have
yeah.
heard. We have
Yeah.
we've shared here on your show, Marcia, and in other spaces about girls being bullied and beaten um,
Mhm.
by other girls by the instructions of staff. We've talked about girls being sexually abused. We've talked about the solitary confinement. You
Mhm.
know, we've and if it reaches the stage where we need to list these allegations just to jolt the memory of the minister, that is precisely what we will do. That is precisely what we will do, because we want the public to understand that we as a people and as mothers, we are not going to sit by and hear our children talk about being beaten, being
Mhm.
sexually molested, about being prostituted. We're not going to
Wow.
sit back and hear not even one child speak about that kind of treatment and not ask the state a question. So we want people to be aware of, we want the public to be aware of what we are demanding and why we are demanding it and why we see it as our right to know.
Mhm, mhm. This is a very, very, very serious allegations, and I believe that, as you said, the public, we have a right to know, and so I want to commend you all, Women in Action, for what you are doing at this time, and I think you are actively trying to help some of the wards who have been formally released from Government Industrial School, right? Is that so?
Yes, 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 that's correct. Many of these young women need to find their footing at this stage in their lives. There is rehabilitative work that needs to be done with them. Many of them, they're angry, they're scared, and they just need even the very basic food, clothing, and shelter they are in need of. And we have come together to provide those things for them. And we
Yes.
want to invite the public to assist us in this mission. You can find us on Facebook at Women in Action. Marcy, I'm going to send you our email address. That's womeninaction.bb@gmail, so that if you are interested in making a contribution towards shelter, so that is rental of facilities for these girls, food, we are collecting food, personal care items, food items, and donations for services.
Wow. So
Well,
you
we
guys
would
are doing,
greatly,
you're doing all of that. You're doing all of that. So you are not just out there rah rah making noise, but you are actually helping some of the former wards.
absolutely, because there's the need. We can't ignore that. We can't be saying that these girls deserve better care and yet not offer them that better care. So we have to respond. We have to
Okay.
respond. And they came to us, they turned to us and say, well, I have nowhere to sleep tonight. I
Right.
have no food. I have no food to eat. Just the basic personal essentials I don't have. Can you help me with them? And what are we to do? We can't turn on. But at the same time, we are also trying to instill in these girls a sense of dignity and self-worth, and give them the direction that they need. Also give them the opportunity to spend time learning in getting those that educational qualification they would have missed out on. Because another one of the allegations, uh Marcia,
Somehow
another
your audio seems weird. Are you
I
there
think there was
still?
a call that was trying.
I
I'm
see.
still here. Are you hearing?
Yes. Okay. As you sort that out, and we're going to those of you who are watching, we are going to be talking about the Summit of the Americas that is on the way at the moment in Los Angeles. As we would have heard last week, that the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines asked for CARICOM members to boycott that summit. But before we do, we have Miss Tempu Nefertari on, and she's giving us an update of what's happening with the girls at least their attempt at helping the girls that are formally released from the government industrial school, and also asking for an update from the minister concerning those girls that were put in the psychiatric hospital and in solitary confinement. Tempu, are you there?
I am. So I was just
Yes.
making the point, Marcia, that one of those allegations also is that the girls were not allowed to go to school. They weren't allowed, some of them were not allowed to go online during the period of online classes. There was no school taking place, no teaching. So for the time that they were there in that institution, what were they doing? So that is ground that we need to cover now with them, so that they have at least the foundation that they need to go out there and get employment, or even to further their studies. So I want to commend the other women who are working with us in Women in Action, and invite the public to link us on Facebook, send us an email of the assistance that you can lend to this very worthy cause. We will soon be publishing our local bank account and the US bank account, so that we can receive donations, so that we can keep up this work. Because there are quite a few girls and young women who are in need of assistance.
Yes. Let me just say thank you so much, Tempu, for joining us and giving us this very, very worthwhile information. And what I'm very, very thrilled about is that it's not just talk and writing in the newspaper, but you're actually helping young ladies who are formally released from government industrial school and to kind of get them back in society. So those of you who are on these warriors, the TMWS warriors who've been on talking about this issue, this is a time, guys, where you can help to support. And you know, you can reach out to me at 236 7000. That's 246-236-7000, and I will be able to pass on the information of the Women in Action. And Tempu is going to send us the actual email address that you can write them directly, because I know a lot of you want to help, and we are going to provide that avenue for you to be able to help the Women in Action. So thank you so much, Tempu, for coming on, and please keep up the good work.
Thank you, Marcia.
God bless you. Bye-bye. Okay, guys, that's Tempu Nefertari from Women in Action giving us a very important update on what is happening in Barbados here with Women in Action. Well, I told you that we're going to have two journalists with us today, and one has already joined us here in the studio, and he is none other than Mr. Shaun Ajamu Hutchinson, who writes on political, social, and cultural issues. His articles, commentaries, features, and reviews have been published in the TT Guardian, Newsday, and Newsday Tobago, and the New Black Magazine.com, for which he has been arts and deputy editor. He's an editor for the Caribbean Empowerment blog, and he's active in the Tobago Writers Guild and the Tobago Civil Net. And you can access the Caribbean Empowerment blog at caribbeanempowerment.wordpress.com. And we are so thrilled to have Mr. Shaun Ajamu, I like that, Ajamu Hutchinson.
Correct. Greetings to you, Marcia. Greetings to all your viewers and all your listeners in the Caribbean, in this hemisphere, around the world. It's a very important initiative, very important forum that you're providing for us to share ideas, to debate the issues which concern us. I was particularly intrigued by your previous guest, Sister Nefertari, who spoke about the problems encountered by some young women in that case, in government care, in the government schools in Barbados. This seems to be a problem that besets many young people, young children, young pupils in schools, where their rights to an education and right to thrive as young people seem to be violated, causing distress and disturbance for them throughout their lives. So that story, I've read of that story, I've heard of that story going on with the government schools in Barbados. We have similar problems going on here in Trinidad and Tobago. Maybe not as stark or exact replica, but we definitely have problems in our education system where the right to an education is sometimes compromised and sometimes affected for our young people. And we see some problems also in terms of the impact of that with educational qualifications, violence amongst young people and adolescents. It's a serious problem in the Caribbean. So I was intrigued by your previous guest, but I'm happy to be here this afternoon to discuss the Summit of the Americas currently taking place in Los Angeles, California. Also another hemispheric regional area of controversy, of debate. Debate has been underway for the past 2 or 3 weeks in the lead up to the summit, and for us in the Caribbean, the debate has been whether or not our heads of state should or should not attend.
Well, actually, Shaun, let me just read a little bit from the actual letter So we have the actual letter from Prime Minister Ralph Gonsalves, from who's the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And so this letter, guys, was written on May 11th, 2022. So as he said, you're right, Shaun, it's been going on for a couple of weeks. And it says it's written to the Honorable John Bricino, Prime Minister of Belize, and he's the chairman of CARICOM. And it says it's from the Prime Minister, Gonzalez. It says, read the upcoming summit of the Americas. It says, I write concerning the upcoming summit of the Americas, which is mired in a simmering controversy as to whether or not the member states of CARICOM ought to attend, and if so, at what level. This controversy has arisen due solely to the governments of Cuba, the Republic of Venezuela, and Nicaragua to attend, right? Where this is the USA, they have not invited these countries to attend. And Mr. Gonzalez says, I've been according this matter with a mature consideration. I've been in several conversations with many heads of state in CARICOM, the presidents of Cuba, Venezuela, and the United States government, and leaders of civil society across the Caribbean. I have arrived at the conclusion that CARICOM's leaders ought not to attend the summit in LA, scheduled for June 2022, unless the US government alters its position and invite the governments of Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. He says larger principles are at stake, so to practical issues relating to CARICOM itself. So this is the actual letter of Mr. Gonzalez asking for a boycott of CARICOM. What are your thoughts about that? I mean, there's some people who say they're not in agreement that CARICOM should not, should not boycott. That if we boycott, we will be boycotting at our own peril. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think, Marcia, you might say the stable door is closed and the horse already bolted. So the question of boycott symbolizes or expresses the concern of several regional leaders, not only in the Caribbean, but throughout the hemisphere, in South America, in Central America, in Latin America generally, that a summit of the Americas, which essentially is an apartheid summit, a separate but equal summit, which excludes three important countries, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, from the summit, cannot have legitimacy, cannot be considered open, democratic, inclusive. So the sentiment in the period leading up to the convening of the summit has been, let us have an inclusive summit. Let everyone participate and try and address, solve, debate, discuss the problems that we have. But in the face of that sentiment, we have the United States government, what you might call a persistent repeat offender, demonstrating arrogance, demonstrating bold-faced refusal to accept that the Americas is all the countries of the Americas, from north to south, east and west, and imposing exclusionary measures on the participation of certain countries is not the way to go. So I think the call for a boycott was an important call, symbolizing and expressing the distaste for the refusal to admit those three countries, who, it should be said, have been denounced for several years as a troika of tyranny by the Americans, which reflects, I think, the prejudice towards their political systems and towards the history that those three countries have experienced over the past few years, particularly in which they've decided to adopt a different social, political, and economic path, one which suits their own circumstances. And this seems to be something that's resented by the United States. So I think the question of the boycott was an important one at that time. right now, the summit is underway. Leaders are there from Trinidad and Tobago, from different countries in the
Places,
region,
yeah.
from
I mean,
Jamaica, from Barbados, from St. Vincent.
before I have an article which they have all the countries there that it's actually going on, but I just wanted to register something here, and thank you for that. Just sharing that piece of information with us. To introduce what we're talking about, very very important. But the Global African Congress, or the GAC, they have taken a stance. And so here we have, early in May, we had about May 12th, we had that letter from Ralph Gonzalez, and May 29th, the Global African Congress, they also sent out a press release. And they said, as members of the Global African Congress, or GSC, we're immensely proud of the initial stance of CARICOM governments that they would have boycotted the Summit of the Americas if Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua, 3 sister countries, were not invited to attend the summit. Unfortunately, that initial principled stance of CARICOM in defense of the sovereignty and self-determination of our 3 sister countries is now waning. No doubt because of the tremendous political and economic pressures from the US empire to get the CARICOM member countries to capitulate, and attend the summit in LA, USA. They say, we in the GSC would like our CARICOM governments and leaders to know that we fully understand the enormous pressures and possible threats that the US government is bringing to bear against their initial principled stance. A stance that made all of us as Caribbean people proud to see our leaders standing up to the US empire in defense of our collective sovereignty and self-determination for the following 3 reasons. And it goes on, some of the reasons that you've already outlined. And so this is, GSC recognized, Shaun, that the CARICOM leaders were waning, and GSC recognized that there would be some pressure by the US empire. I love the way that they put it. The US empire on CARICOM. What kind of pressure do you think, Shaun, would have been levied on CARICOM for them to be actually at the summit right now?
Yes, I think the Global African Congress letter correspondence mirrors something that was also disseminated by the Caribbean Pan-African Network out of Trinidad and Tobago, which said very similar things, which expressed pride in the CARICOM stance at that time, but recognized the difficulties that they would face in disputing the positions of the United States. I suspect that behind the scenes there's been strong arm tactics, arm twisting, threats to withdraw funding, withdraw support, threats to denounce or criticize Caribbean governments. Some of these threats may be real. Some of them may be just smoke screens for what exists already, which is Caribbean countries, CARICOM, which are already under pressure economically, diplomatically, and politically in the region. Very much to do with the fact that we are a dominated region, and that our independence and our sovereignty, sovereignty is compromised in many ways. So behind the scenes, we see, I would suspect, arm twisting and other similar measures. But as I was saying, I believe that the question of boycott is now is over. We're not in the boycott situation anymore. The summit is now underway. The issue now, I think, is for us to recognize what this summit is for, what these types of summits do, what they achieve, what they aim to achieve, and if and how they can be transformed into democratic forums for addressing some of the serious problems that exist in the hemisphere in this case. But I suspect that this summit, like most summits that we see throughout the world, are grandstanding, cosmetic processes where photo opportunities take place, and the action, the decision making takes place, excuse me, behind the backs of the people, and it replicates to a large extent problems that we have on the ground in our societies, where most of the decision making takes place out there, so to speak.
Right.
We hear about it afterwards. This summit has taken up a quite lofty sounding agenda for sustainable development, for digitalization, for what
Yeah.
they call human rights and democracy, all of which are very important matters
Yes.
for discussion. But I don't think that the measures in place by the United States in convening the summit will address them. One, because three important players have been barred from entry. Two, because the American political system is dominated by big business. And three, the people who it seems have been invited to participate, the United States business chambers, United States entrepreneurs and business community, and what are described as civil society organizations in the United States, don't seem to have, in my opinion, much credibility or legitimacy in terms of discussing the problems and providing or offering solutions to the problems which beset us in the region. So it's problematic in that way. The summit is underway. There'll be, I suspect, press coverage and photo opportunities, and Joe Biden will get a chance to be seen with what they call the family gathering, when they all of them gather at the end and take a picture. But other than that, the serious problems that beset us in the region, in the Caribbean, in the hemisphere, I doubt very much that they'll be addressed.
That would even be addressed. But let me ask you. I mean, this is a summit that is done, periodically. And what benefit has it done for the Caribbean over the years? This is not the first summit. And I think that's what you're alluding to. Have we, the people of the Caribbean, those who are watching me right now on Carib Vision, hi, welcome to those from the 16 Caribbean countries that are watching on Carib Vision, and those who are watching on 246 Bajan Vibes, which is coming out of the UK. Lots of Caribbean people in the diaspora and living in the Caribbean are tuned in. And we can all remember about these summits. What have they really done? Shaun, for us?
Well, that's a very important question. And I sense that there's some frustration in your inquiry, because I don't think they've done anything for us. Most of these summits are, like I say, cosmetic, grandstanding occasions where the leadership of certain countries get together, present their prejudiced views, also offer to us reheated solutions to problems which have existed for a long time, and we go back to business as usual. The first of these summits was held in 1994, organized during the presidency of Bill Clinton, essentially to unite the hemisphere behind the free trade area of the Americas. Now, for those who have long memories, my memory is not that long, but my analysis goes back far. The free trade area of the Americas fell apart after a few years. It was a political economic union between principally the United States, Canada, and Mexico, dominated or to be dominated by the oligarchy of the United States. It fell apart. So that was the first one. Periodically since then, these summits have taken place in different countries of the hemisphere, and they are I guess, events in which the leadership can come together, discuss particular goals, as they are on this occasion. But they are, as I say, they seem to be mostly cosmetic, mostly designed for photo opportunities and gesture politics by the United States. So probably coming out of this, the American government, the State Department, Anthony Blinken, and others will be able to present to their electorate, to their people, that they've done something for the region, that they're united with the region, But in terms of real action, the real action, I think, is in the fact that our region is, well, the southern part of the region is facing significant political, economic, social, and cultural problems, not least of which those have been brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic, but also drugs, violence, armed gangs, many of which have their source in gun running, drug cartels, and political interference led by, organized in many cases by criminal enterprises which are linked very strongly with the United States, whether official or unofficial organizations of that country. So some of these serious problems, I don't think will be debated.
So in essence, you're saying that our the leaders who attended, which I'm going to be reading from Loop, it says here that there are several of them to attend the Summit of America. So we know that the boycott didn't happen. So these leaders that are attending, really and truly, you're saying that in essence, you're saying that they are attending for a photo op.
If that's what you suggest, if they have something concrete to offer, that would be a good thing. But again, there's like a democratic, what you might call a democratic deficit. This is another layer of bureaucracy, of pageantry, of symbolism, which demonstrates that we the people are very far from political power, political decision making.
Because I mean, if they can, if the US can be telling us, okay, these are the countries that we are going to meet with, if they can be in such a position, to tell us, and we are going to say, okay, we're going to go, we forget our sister countries, and we are going to go ahead. I mean, one wonders what is the purpose of this meeting. But let's look at hear what Luke Barbados is saying. Luke is saying Caribbean community CARICOM leaders are on Monday, which was 2 days ago. They're heading off to the US to attend the 9th Summit of the Americas amidst call for a boycott of the event over the exclusion of Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. And we must note that the US has not budged. The US has not budged, but the Caribbean leaders are gone straight ahead. Belize Prime Minister and chairman of the 15-member CARICOM grouping said that he had been informed by the CARICOM Secretary General, Dr. Carla Barnett, that 7 countries had already given a commitment to attend the week-long summit, which gets underway on Tuesday in LA. So it started yesterday, guys. Belize we have agreed that Belize will attend the summit, Racina said, joining Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and Suriname, whose leaders have publicly announced their attendance at the summit that will be held under the theme, Building a Sustainable, Resilient, and Equitable Future for the Hemisphere. Washington has said that as chair and host, it will work with the region stakeholders towards securing leader-level commitments and concrete actions that dramatically improve pandemic response and resilience, promote a green and equitable recovery, build strong and inclusive democracies, and address the root cause of irregular migration. So this is what is said to be happening. So we know that that it's on the way, and that our Caribbean leaders are there. We noted that we did not hear publicly that whether Miss Motley was attending or not, but we suspect that she's there because you won't say it, Shaun, but we know in Barbados she's the poster girl, and so she would definitely be in a lot of those photo opportunities, which is very important for Miss Motley these days. So, go ahead, Shaun.
Well, I think Mia Motley has got a very good media team, and I'm sure that she will she can
More.
participate.
No, no, let's love that. Let's say that. I love that. But you are the most diplomatic guest I've had. You're such a journalist.
Well,
Shaun says
well,
that Miss
Miss-
Motley, guys, do you agree with her? Do you agree with Shaun? Shaun, listen, Shaun, why you have to mash up the woman like that? Shaun
no, no,
said,
no, 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 no. She's a legitimate leader. She's faced her people in elections, in ballots, and she has received some level of credibility and authority as a result of those things. But so have many other leaders, and their media teams don't seem to be as effective as hers.
so we want to give kudos to Miss Motley for her
Kudos to
media
Miss
team,
Motley.
because we know, we can tell ahead of time, guys, you know, what's going to happen after the summit. And she probably will be hugging up Joe Biden, and they're sharing a drink or something. Something's going to happen, because the media team for Miss Motley is very, 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 very strong. And so we're looking for the sound bites that are going to come out. Because I think, I mean, I agree with you. I think all of these kinds of events that they bring us together really is in their benefit. And I can't for the life of me understand what is it that our Caribbean leaders are going for. I noted that the SVG Prime Minister is not there. Antiguan Prime Minister is not there. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm looking here to see the other one. Which is the other Caribbean country that's not there?
I think the two most high-profile ones you've already mentioned, Ralph Gonzalez of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Antigua and Barbuda's Prime Minister.
And Gaston Brown from Antigua, and also Keith Mitchell from
correct,
Grenada.
of Grenada, yes.
Right. So we have those three that are not there. And I don't know what's happened to Mexico.
The Mexican president, AMLO, has decided not to attend, although he's sent, or his foreign minister, the foreign minister of that country will be there. I think that what we've seen over the last few days is that the governments of the hemisphere, Caribbean, of CARICOM, several countries in the region, have found their own way to protest at the exclusion of Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela from this summit. And indeed, adding insult to injury, to invite Juan Guaido, who was imposed on the people of Venezuela by the United States State Department as their president, strangely and in a very unorthodox way, to exacerbate the political problems in that country, has been invited to this summit. So it reflects, I think, the contradictions in this region, in this hemisphere, the problems of democracy, of participation, of who decides on these very important questions. For example, you were just citing one of the aims of this conference, which is of the summit rather, which is stated to address issues of democracy and human rights. They're laudable and very important questions. But frankly, the United States, in my opinion, is not in a position to lecture anyone on the question of democracy or human rights, which they equate with what they describe as multi-party democracy and right to vote, which are indeed important, but again, symbolic. On the question, another issue that's been raised for resolution by this summit, or at this summit, is the question of migration. Now, we in the Caribbean, we know that we have more of our people outside of our region than those who live in the region.
That's so correct.
So migration is an issue, whether it's to Europe, whether it's to the north of America, to Canada, or to the United States. And we also have irregular migration to many countries in the region, to Venezuela, from and to Venezuela, to Colombia, to Brazil. There's Haitians everywhere as a result of the crisis in that country. Cubans are encouraged to migrate in irregular ways to the United States. They're very serious problems. In Martinique and Guadeloupe, people from other Caribbean islands try their best to enter those two islands because they are, although they're in the Caribbean Sea, considered to be, and in fact are, a part of the European Union and France. So migration is a very serious issue for our people in the Caribbean. But the migration, the outflow of people, the brain drain, however you want to describe it, is a consequence of our domination, a consequence of the Caribbean's political, social, cultural, and economic problems. So addressing those issues is clearly very important. But again, I stress, the Americans have a duplicit, or the United States government, not the American people. The American government seems to have a duplicitous approach towards migration. On the one hand, they are locking children up in cages on their southern border, while on the other hand, admitting, for example, Ukrainians in number to the United States, as they admit Cubans in their numbers to the United States. And we saw very recently the very disturbing and distressing imagery of Border Patrol officers on horseback, attempting to deter Haitians.
They were actually whipping the Haitians. I mean, it's so demeaning. And those are the things I can't understand with these Caribbean leaders. And why don't they ask? I mean, it's almost like our leaders are spineless, really. When you think of what you see happening to these Haitians versus to what they're doing to the Ukrainians, you know, to these white people who are fleeing their countries and you know, on a horseback and whipping the Haitians, and our Caribbean leaders, I don't hear not one of them asking and demanding you know, for equity in immigration. We don't see that. But yet still, I mean, they have taken themselves up to go and sit at this table. And us in the Caribbean, as Caribbean people, we need to rise up and demand much better from our leaders, greater accountability. Actually, Bajan Vibes is asking a question here. It's 246 Bajan Vibes Radio, which is it's an online radio, and it's a call-in program, a very, very powerful one. I don't know if you know about it there in Trinidad, but let me tell you, it's causing a real ruckus here in Barbados. And Bajan Vibes is asking, it says, good afternoon, does your guest know why these countries have not been invited? Why Nicaragua and Cuba and what's the Venezuela not invited?
Well, it's a very simple question to answer. The United States government have decided who to invite and who not to invite, and they have a criteria for admittance to the summit. And one of the criterion is adherence to what they describe as democratic values and free and fair elections. And they have denounced the elections held in Venezuela and in Nicaragua. They've disputed the results of those elections, and they reject and have rejected over decades the conclusions of the Cuban people to establish the type of government that they have established since 1959. So the reasons that those three countries, like I say, they've been insulted and been defined as a troika of tyranny. The United States government has described these three countries as tyrannical dictatorships who don't meet the criteria for what's described as free and fair elections. Essentially, this means their leadership is one which has an independent path, whose people have decided that they want to follow a course of economic and political development in their own interests, and not submitting or capitulating to pressures imposed on them by the United States. This is why those countries have been barred from the summit.
I mean, it must be said that the Caribbean leaders would come around those countries and to support them, you know, in them being sovereign countries. They're sovereign countries. However, the U.S. is not acknowledging that, and yet still they're talking about democracy. You know, it's unbelievable.
Well, I think it should be mentioned also that what guides the policy of the United States government for centuries, almost 2 centuries, since 1823, is its Monroe Doctrine. And the Monroe Doctrine says we, the United States, can intervene in any country, any region of this hemisphere as we see fit to defend what we consider to be our interests. And the Monroe Doctrine was established to deter European powers such as Britain and France and Spain and Portugal, for that matter, from intervening in the hemisphere. At that time, Brazil, or rather Spain, Portugal had significant colonies in the hemisphere, and the Americans were saying to them and to the world and to us, we will call the shots. And it's this doctrine, Monroe Doctrine, which today they dress up in words such as manifest destiny. They refer to or consider themselves to be the indispensable nation, and they back up and consolidate these phrases with actual, real politics, political action, economic action, such as the free trade area of the Americas, such as in the Southern Command, the military command which decides or which intervenes in or can intervene in, which determines the fate of our region or wants to determine the fate of our region. So it's important, I think, to say that this Monroe Doctrine is alive and well. The people of the region, of the hemisphere, are threatened by it.
Wow.
It's going to be difficult for us. It will be difficult for us, the people of the region, to establish free, independent, sovereign, self-sufficient, mutually beneficial countries which support each other in times of good and bad, in times of hardship and difficulty, with this, what you might be called a sword of Damocles held over us by the United States. For example, COVID-19 is a big problem over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
It persists up to now. It's said that the United States and countries in Latin America fared the worst statistically in terms of death rates, fatality rates. Another country in the region, Cuba, has been sending, and throughout this COVID-19 pandemic and before, has been sharing their acknowledged healthcare expertise in all the countries in the region.
Right.
They've even help to the United States. This is something concrete that we in the region can do to support and help each other. United States government has held up their hands and refused that such assistance. I think that we, the peoples of the region, we, the peoples of the Caribbean, we, the peoples of the hemisphere, can unite in action. We can come together for mutual benefit. But this ninth summit of the Americas is not the forum for that. There's actually another summit taking place.
I saw that there's another summit, and is it called by Cuba? Cuba is calling this other summit?
Well, no, there's a workers' summit convened by civil society organizations, trade unions, people's organizations, grassroots organizations to discuss issues of concern to the people. That's also taking place, I believe, in Los Angeles. The week before, there was an ALBA TCP summit, which took place in Cuba. ALBA TCP is ALBA, the Bolivarian Alternative for Our America, which is a regional grouping comprising Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, St. Vincent, I believe Antigua and Barbuda may be in there. We need to, don't quote me on that. But it's another regional grouping based, I think, more on equality of participation rather than domination and supremacist ideas. So there is an alternative. There always is an alternative to the prevailing ideas. And that alternative can be manifest, that can be put into practice with the democratization of our region. So it's important. It's important that the summit is taking place. It's important that we keep abreast of the information, but we should be realistic in what its purpose is, what it can achieve, how we can participate in it, and and the purpose that it serves.
Yeah. Well, let's look at just some of the comments from people who are on. Kendall is watching from Canada, and she is saying here that though America powers might be okay when the U.S. with Joe Biden wasn't following I don't understand clearly what she's saying, but I think what Kendall is saying is that throughout her comments here,
Mm.
she,
Following World Economic Forum Globalist Path.
well, here's another comment. She said, I could easily be wrong, but I personally believe that all these summits are globalist brainwashing summits for globalists. That is Kendall from Canada. And I know in a previous comment, she was saying how those that are, coming in from Ukraine into Canada, how they're treated well. The kind of treatment that they get, because they're talking about they're going to discuss irregular
Migration.
migration in this hemisphere. But when you look at how they're treating the Ukrainians who are coming over versus the Haitians, it's deplorable.
Well, I think that examples such as that demonstrate where honesty lies, where sincerity lies, and who decides on these questions. We feel sympathy in our hearts for the problems in Ukraine, but we also, looking deeper, I think, can recognize that the war or the conflict could be stopped if billions of dollars were not being agreed to be invested there. Even recently, the United States government and the European Union decided or agreed on aid packages comprising billions of dollars and euros to support the Ukrainian conflict, to send arms and ammunition. So we, the peoples of the world, desire peace, an end to conflicts, and mutual coexistence. But it seems that there are other forces in the world who don't support lofty goals and aims such as that, including in our own region, in this hemisphere, and we can, with the benefit of our analysis and study, define who the culprits for those problems are. This is my view.
Yeah, I mean, this is. I mean, I'm listening to this and saying, "Wow!" I mean, the Caribbean, we have not yet. We're not really grown up yet. It's almost when you talk about the Monroe Doctrine, it just feels so damning that we really don't have control of our region. Because they can come in here, the U.S. can come in and do whatever they like at any point, which is what they, why they can now say who can come to the summit and who can't. And we, as people of the Caribbean, we're looking to our leaders and hoping that they would stand up. But with this Monroe Doctrine, it seems like not much can be done.
Well, I think the Monroe Doctrine is the phrase, is the noun that's used to describe the practice. But the practice is very real. Not only in economic domination, but also military intelligence and what's known as security integration. Most of the countries of CARICOM, most of our countries are integrated thoroughly with police, intelligence, military entities and institutions led by the United States. There's an annual military exercise that takes place in this region. There's, like I say, security, what's known as security intelligence and police collaboration. This is not benign. Most of these relationships and institutions were consolidated precisely in order to prevent our people from taking a democratic stand in our own favor. And they were established most in the main in the early 1980s during the Cold War. When the world was then, as now, dominated by two global powers, which was soon to be defeated, namely the Soviet Union. But the United States seems to be persisting in that, in the outlook of that Cold War period. And Southcom annual military exercises bring danger to our region, turn our region into an arena and a terrain for potential violence and armed conflict. France, the United Kingdom, Netherlands all have military forces here, as well as the United States. It makes our region volatile. It can cause volatility in our region when I think our people express a wish, an aspiration for peace and security, articulated it in our demand that the Caribbean be a zone of peace, a zone of peaceful development. This is something I think is an alternative vision that can be aspired to and can be struggled for.
So, I mean, just listening to you, as a Caribbean citizen and someone who just love the region, it really sounds very daunting, to be honest. And I'm so disappointed in our leadership, because this has been something that's been going on for years. And to see that we're not in a position to stand up and to speak up for the region as a citizen. I don't know about the others who are watching. I see Erica Ryan is saying, shut down Southcom, end Operation South Winds. Steve Moore, who is a Bajan watching from the UK, is in the UK, saying politicians are not leaders. And we're seeing, there was a comment here from Jamaica by Christopher Peer from Jamaica. It says, for the life of it, so much money sent into Ukraine, millions. It is always being no money for the Caribbean, even when the great Obama was in. Some people say we probably fared a little better under Trump, because we're all against Trump. But I mean, Biden is in, and we love to take sides in the Caribbean. We love to we were all Joe Biden. And the question is, what has he done? Here we are, another summit, and they have excluded 3 of our sister countries. When we have Mr. Bousquet here with us from St. Lucia, it's always a pleasure to have you, Mr. Bousquet, and he's a noted journalist here in the region, and has a wealth of experience. Because of time, I would not try to read his very long bio. But, trust me, these are 2 very able men, and it's an honor just to be seated here with you. So, Mr. Bousquet, what are your thoughts about the summit that is underway? Although there was call for boycott, there's no boycott. Our Caribbean leaders are sitting there probably with cap in hand, sitting and waiting there for something to happen for the Caribbean. Is anything going to happen for the Caribbean, Mr. Bousquet?
Well, the Caribbean, glad to be here. I put in the chat that I'm sorry to be unavoidably late, but I'm always glad to be with the show. And not having heard what has gone before, I would say that I did have a little bit of expectation a month ago when the Antigua and Barbuda ambassador to the OAS and the United States, Sir Ronald Saunders, raised a red flag in Washington about CARICOM not willing to attend until and unless the summit was treated not as a summit of the United States, but a summit of the Americas. And that position had been taken collectively by CARICOM member states in Belize in March of this year, but it hadn't been communicated publicly. And therefore, what Ambassador Saunders was saying a month ago was preceded by his knowledge and participation in that joint CARICOM decision. I started getting losing those positive hopes a month later when in his latest article, because Ambassador Saunders has a weekly column. And in his latest column, I saw as a complete reverse or backpedal. I wasn't too sure which of the two words is best, but a complete reverse of that article a month ago in which he was raising the red flag. This one sounded like a white flag, where, in as he put it, Antigua and Barbuda in that case was surrendering, from the standpoint is that the article was quoting the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda as having said that based on a previous experience where the host of a previous meeting, I think it was in Lima in Peru, had indicated on selecting who should attend by virtue of the power of the host, and therefore, in that sense, it was a clear white flag, like I said, a surrender flag, which said, listen, we're going to go ahead because whether we go or not, President Biden is not going to change his mind. That also led me to again underline the continued thought that CARICOM is both strongest and weakest on foreign policy. When it comes to opposing the issue of U.S. military strategy against Venezuela under the Trump administration, CARICOM was 14-1 against that. In a situation, however, where the President of the United States, this time Biden and not President Trump, who you will recall selectively invited 5 CARICOM leaders to an official meeting at his private golf course in Florida, and that really threw the cat among the pigeons in CARICOM. I can see the same. In fact, we are seeing the same happening today in terms of the 8th Summit of the Americas, from the standpoint that President Biden is holding on to his power as host to exclude 3 countries that his administration considers are not democratic, despite the fact that Latin American and Caribbean countries in the majority had said they would not attend. But the moment the president of Mexico indicated that if the 3 countries were, if there were any exclusions, he would not attend, but that his foreign affairs minister would attend, I started having second thoughts, because if a boycott of the summit means that the head of state or head of government is not going to be there, then it means non-participation. But it would appear to me that that boycott was reduced to non-attendance by the head of government, but participation by the foreign minister. And I think CARICOM leaders started to backtrack along those lines because of the high level of respect that Mexico has both in Latin America and in the United States. And that was seen as the Mexican president having his cake and eating it, which he could have afforded to do. But in the case of Antigua, and I stick with Antigua because it is the Antigua case that was laid out in public in Ambassador Saunders's article. In the case of Antigua, we have to remember that the World Trade Organization many years ago ruled against the United States in a case brought by Antigua relating to internet gambling. And despite the fact that the World Trade Organization had ruled against the United States, I think that was under the Clinton administration, no U.S. president has agreed to honor and to follow the ruling by the WTO. And it, the question came in the back of my mind as to whether that continuing concern by Antigua might have been put on the table, and whether it did feature or factor in the discussions that would have preceded Antigua's decision to attend. But nonetheless, I
But
think,
but the article that I just saw in Loop, the Loop article said that that they did not attend.
who, Antigua?
Antigua, that says, but probably, oh, they said the most likely would not. Leaders not likely to attend the event are Grenada's Prime Minister and the Antiguan and Barbudan Prime Minister Gaston Brown.
Well, that's in keeping with what I just said. In the case of Grenada, Grenada is heading to general elections, and that is a total shutdown for participation in international affairs, particularly in a situation where the ruling party, which won all the seats, like in Barbados, is under some threat. I mean, it can only lose; it can't win any more seats. But in the case of Antigua, like I said, what I suspect is that while the Prime Minister of Antigua might not attend, it is quite possible that an Antigua delegation will be
I
present,
understand.
headed by the Antigua ambassador to the OAS and the United States, Sir Ron Saunders himself. But
So,
has the conference actually opened?
so really and truly, we don't have. What about St. Vincent and the Grenadines? Did they send a delegation, or they have completely Gonzales have completely boycotted it?
Well, I would stop using the word boycott, because our interpretation of boycott is non-attendance and non-participation, a blank shot. In this case, what you have is non-attendance but participation. Non-attendance with participation. The success of any conference or summit boils down to participation in the discussions and in the decisions that will come out of the Summit of the Americas, which always set the tone for the Organization of American States between summits. So, insofar as Washington is concerned, they will have won from the standpoint of the conference not having been boycotted 100%. Secondly, by attendance by more heads of government than those who stayed away. Thirdly, that the conference will take place, and despite having um, returned or reinstituted flights to Cuba from the United States and allowing Chevron, the American oil company, to enter into talks with Venezuela with a view to possibly arriving at Chevron returning to Venezuela. Nicaragua did indicate they're not interested in attending at all. And therefore, despite all of that, President Biden won his day in terms of ensuring that the three countries he did not invite were not attending. And Cuba did say that they would not participate at any level if excluded at at the head level. And I don't see Venezuela participating either if Cuba isn't. So, like I said, everybody has their cake and eat it. CARICOM both boycotted and participated, and Washington had its way in terms of hosting a conference with participation and non-participation, but totally, it's going to be a conference that is going to yield a final communique addressing the 5 topics that they have identified, and giving work to the OAS between now and the 9th summit.
What I was saying earlier, Earl, pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Is
I'm glad
that,
to be here.
yeah, man, is that the summit, this latest summit, is the latest in a line of events which are mostly cosmetic, mostly grandstanding events, but also important in that they reflect or symbolize how far we the people are from the
Mhm.
democratic decision making process. So everything that comes out of this summit, its communique, any decisions they make in those five areas of concern they want to address,
Yes.
will have been addressed by bureaucrats, technocrats in advance.
Yeah.
And everything that will
They're just going to
be
sign the dotted
disseminated,
line.
yeah, it will be a headline. So, in terms of benefit to us in the region or us in the hemisphere, it presents to us another example of absence of democracy, absence of our participation, absence of grassroots participation. I think particularly symbolized by the fact that we're having a debate over, or a discussion, a conversation over whether or not CARICOM as a regional body of 15 countries is going to attend. But that debate is held at the leadership level, not at the people's level.
Mhm.
So this is also an important dimension, I think, of what's going
Yes.
on with that summit. Yes, the sentiment reflected, articulated by Ralph's letter, by Gaston Brown, by Ron Sanders, by the people, by the progressive people, has been how can three important countries of the region be barred from attendance? That's
Mhm.
a sentiment that's articulated, but then that sentiment can't be given real concrete like muscle
Mhm.
because the leadership is divorced from or separate from the people. So
Mhm.
this is another dimension which is also reflected in the fact that these summits are again
And, and,
grandstanding events.
and if I may come in here, it is against
Yes.
that background that I find that we tend, as progressives who would like to see the world turn faster than it is, we tend to sometimes overestimate and over expect we have over expectations on what to expect from CARICOM leaders.
Mhm,
Mhm.
We at our level know that CARICOM leaders operate on the basis of who is elected in the
yeah,
elections that take place in all of those 15 CARICOM countries every year. And there is no grand design that decides that we're always going to have a positive or negative or middle of the road grouping. But I
Mhm.
think we tend to mistakenly use a one size fits all measurement where we assess those heads of government by virtue of the importance of their positions as
mm,
heads of state and government. We tend to overestimate the extent to which they are driven by elections, by
Mhm.
votes,
Right.
by wanting to win the next election.
Politics.
By politics, I don't call it, I don't put it, say politics generally, because again, that's using one brush. I would say partisan politics.
Mhm.
For the
Okay.
same reason that despite the fact that mass shootings have gone through the roof in the United States, the two parties are not going to agree on anything before midterm elections
Mhm. Mhm.
because the power of the constitutional gun lobby in elections is in the interest of one side to make the midterm elections about defending Americans' right to have a gun.
Mhm.
In the same way, I think I have I tend to take things as they come when it comes to the elected leadership in CARICOM. We were talking about participatory democracy. We all expect and have reason to and should expect that the heads of government will always take the best positions in the interest of the region and in
Mhm.
the interest of their people. And therefore, on the issue of CARICOM heads taking a decision to pursue reparations in 2013 without a referendum,
mhm,
without consultation, I don't have a problem with that
Mhm.
because I would have thought that maybe with a referendum, the partisan side of it could have led to the opposition opposing for opposing sake, and depending on its electoral strength, we might not have had all 14 leaders taking that decision, which is unprecedented globally, where 14 countries come together to make one demand for reparations. On the other hand, when it comes to issues like the Summit of the Americas and issues that have to do with confronting, quote unquote, um, positions taken by Washington in a region that still considers its backyard, where it still applies the Monroe Doctrine century after, more than a century after it was established. Um, in most of these cases, as indicated with the five who went to meet Trump at the Mar-a-Lago meeting in Florida, what you have there is that each of those leaders explained subsequently, because they went in secret, that they were driven by national interests. They put the national interest before the regional interest. And Prime Minister Motley was the CARICOM chair at the time, and she let known the CARICOM position of opposition to it.
But can I ask you that though, something there, because
Go
I
ahead.
just made a note of it to ask you, because why didn't we hear the voice of Miss Motley concerning this particular thing when there are three of our sister countries that are being excluded? Why wasn't there a voice from her? In fact, we have heard nothing in the press from her. I just wrote that down to ask you.
Well, that underlines the point I'm making, or I was about to make, which is that when it comes to standing up to Uncle Tom with his carrot and big stick policy, not all leaders have the strength in the knee to be able to stand up. And in this particular case, where Biden's back is against the wall domestically and internationally, the presidents and prime ministers of CARICOM will each have had reason to first consider whether they're going or not. And secondly, having considered they're going, those who are going will be looking to see what they could get out of going. And I can see Trinidad looking to make peace with Washington over Venezuela, because under Trump and Biden, Washington has opposed Venezuela and Trinidad entering into any sort of oil cooperation across the Gulf of Paria. In the case of Barbados, you have any number of issues relating to Barbados and the United States, but also having to do with Barbados's tenuous negotiations with the World Bank and the IMF, where the United States, in both cases, is a very serious player. And in that sense, I would not say only Prime Minister Motley, because she's not the CARICOM chair at present. Prime Minister of Belize, John Briceño, is the CARICOM chair at present. And I think that when the conference is over on the 10th, then we will be able to see and assess the extent or the wholesomeness or the full entity of CARICOM's participation. And in the week after that, I wouldn't be surprised if we start hearing individual governments making announcements that will obviously have been agreed to during the Summit of the
So,
Americas.
I started off saying I could see them at the table with the cap in hand. So you're basically saying that possibly a week after the summit, we will know if the caps were filled.
Yeah,
Um,
we will know.
and
We'll
so you're
definitely know,
saying
because
really that,
they will be forced to explain their participation and why they turned back on the decision they took collectively in Belize in March.
Yeah.
All 14 of them said they're going, they are boycotting,
Mhm.
all in
All
March, all.
and then they change their minds.
Yeah,
So,
between
but let
March
me
and
ask
May.
you something. What do you think? Because I mean, it was amazing to see that when it came on to Venezuela, when Trump, we're under Trump, that 14 countries, they came together and stood up against Trump regarding Venezuela. But in this case, is it because it's Biden and it's a Democratic Party? Why you think that you now have them, that they swayed and forgot, the
So
decision
I
they
think
made
it's
in March?
I think it's a combination of factors.
Hmm.
The Ukraine war's effect on food and energy prices
Hmm.
is a factor across CARICOM.
Hmm.
Secondly, Biden would always welcome, as they approach midterms elections, any opportunity to show that he has reversed um, or has changed positively America's position where it was made bad by Trump, whether it is in terms of membership and leadership of NATO or in terms of friendship with CARICOM. And while Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, did not himself come to the region, I can tell you that the State Department deployed a team
Hmm.
to CARICOM. Every single CARICOM leader was approached and not asked to be mendicants with caps in hand, but knowing they would have caps in hand, asked, "What do you want in it?"
Mhm.
So one have to ask the question: is there real CARICOM then? If everybody is all about their, national interest? I remember
Yeah, yeah, that's
clearly.
what. Hey, CARICOM, United Nations, OAS. Let us remember, these are all collectives of individual member states, and every government is elected with the responsibility to put the national interest first and foremost above everything else.
Mhm.
Correct.
So even when it comes to regionalism,
Uh-huh.
even when it comes to regionalism, um, leaders tend to um, support regionalism insofar as insofar as it does not affect the national priorities.
Right.
Nobody
Understood.
wants to burn bridges with America for Mr. Biden to say,
Mhm.
we going to put visa plan this and visa
Mhm.
plan that and
So
make it
they
more
have to,
difficult.
they're protecting the national interest. Let me
Yeah,
ask
yeah, yeah,
Sean
yeah, yeah,
also.
yeah. So,
Let me bring
um,
Sean into this discussion here a little bit. But Sean, so what my question is, I remember that when my country, Jamaica, said, that listen, we're going to this meeting that Trump called at his private residence. When they
Mhm.
singled out the
Mhm.
5 countries. And I remember our prime minister here, Mia Mottley, said, "How can you put the interest, your personal, your national interest over the region? If all of us can't go, then we should not go. We should not go." And later on they said, "Well, you weren't even invited." But why would she be? It's interesting to see that response,
Yeah,
because
I think
what Mr. Bousquet is saying makes a lot of sense, that each country is going to look out for their natural interest. So why was it wrong, not wrong then, but right now?
well, I think there's some very deep and profound historical issues at play here. Each of the countries in the Caribbean were established as entities serving whichever, well, protecting or serving or embellishing or enriching whichever colonial power. So the collective, the regional sentiment, although it may be latent, there may be some general idea that we are a Caribbean region, in like even in the objective sense, in our history and in our culture and our way of life. But
Mhm.
day-to-day political affairs, these are individual entities who act as such. Even here in Trinidad and Tobago, we've been an amalgamated twin island, well, entity since 1898, but there's still very strong ideas in Tobago about what's known as, or what's described as, autonomy or independence, or and even secession. This is something that is a problem, I think, in the Caribbean, a vestige of colonial rule, in which we were seen as individual. Each country is seen as an individual entity, a silo in itself, and breaking out of that isolationism, breaking out of that I don't know, limited thinking, is something that has been tried in the Federation, West Indian Federation, which fell apart in the early 1960s, and has, although we have our CARICOM and other regional entities, regional institutions, we've never, I don't think, been able to overcome the problems that you've just described, as occurred in Jamaica in 2018, was it, when they were invited? Those five leaders went to meet with, or Trump went to meet with those five leaders, or the Secretary of State at the time. It was Pompeo. So we've never been able to, we've never been able to overcome a problem such as that. And until we do, I think issues such as whether we do or do not attend summits such as these will persist. But again, I think drawing on what Earl has referred to, I think the boycott, or even the sentiment, the talk of boycott in the period leading up to between March and now, had an important role to play, because it galvanized opinion, it raised the issue, it developed the consciousness to say, who decides on these questions? Who's invited? Who's not invited? Why we can't invite everybody? So it galvanized, I think, a discussion and a debate, not as widespread as it could have been, but it energized a debate. And the debate is ongoing, because I'm sure, well, I'm certain that even in the summit itself, when they come to their final communique, their family photo, of the countries in the region, three important nations are missing. And heads of state will be missing from that family photo, not least of which AMLO from Obrador from Mexico. So the visual part of it also, enhances the sentiment, or strengthens the sentiment that we, the region, or the hemisphere, see ourselves as a united hemisphere. We don't see ourselves as backyard or front yard or appendage of United States. We want to be seen as, regarded as equals with everyone, second to none. This is an outlook, a worldview, which is prevalent.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bousquet. I mean, when we've made such a statement in March that we were going to boycott as a region, and then the boycott didn't happen, and it's not the first time that this discussion has come up. I've gone and done some research and seen that, well, whenever it's coming up, the summit is coming up, there's talk of a boycott and nothing. I mean, what impact does that have on the region as a whole, as a people? Where do we go from here is what I'm saying. As a people, where do we go from here?
It has an impact on the region's image externally more than it does at home, because I still believe that we tend to underestimate the intelligence of the people we call the masses, who politicians tend to always want to represent, because they may not be able to represent themselves and understand the issues sufficiently. But out of historical experience, people who vote have acquired an accumulated experience that is unfortunately overwhelmingly mistrustful of politicians generally. And as a positive consequence of that, forces them around election time to really consider what is being offered by whom, and either decide to see if they could get the best from their new or old constituency representative, or whether to change the party they support on the basis of lack of representation, or whether not to vote at all.
Right.
And therefore, I think that in the context of the Americas summit, while people might have generally hoped that all CARICOM nations would have kept their word to boycott, I also think that the majority are not surprised
You're not surprised.
that
I
it didn't
agree.
happen,
Right.
because it allows them to say again, you see again, them
Yes.
politicians,
So
right?
Yeah, we have the phrase,
we're
don't put
not
it up if you
surprised.
can't manage it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so why don't make the
And I don't
declaration
know,
if you
I don't know
don't
if
make the
this,
declaration if you can't back it up.
Yes,
yeah,
and I think we're coming down to an end. We only have another minute on the show. And Shaun, you were saying that if we can back it up, don't make the declaration. Why are you saying that? And that's your closing
Because
comment.
you lose credibility.
Yes.
Each leader who made that set, well, the CARICOM as a regional body, as a bloc, made a declaration in March, referred to by Earl. If you make the declaration, then you have to stand by the declaration. Our people already have distrust for the politician. The distrust is legitimate. Distrust and uncertainty over their credibility, their honesty, their right to govern. It's all we already have some uncertainty over that. If they behave like that in a regional sense, and we see that kind of duplicity, apparent duplicity, manifest in a local sense. Because we who live in here, we see this, we see how the politicians operate. The mainstream politicians, we see how they operate. So if they're operating like that, day-to-day basis, with water and electricity and current, and they operate in the same way, on a regional sense, in a hemispheric sense, in international forum, the credibility is diminished even further. This presents opportunities for us, we the people, and it also demonstrates the weakness of this process. And I said right at the beginning that the summits such as these tend to legitimize how far we the people are from participating in important political events. And I think CARICOM, we respect the leaders, we respect what they're doing, but like I say, credibility is lost, has been lost, I think, between March and now.
Yes, thank you so much. And Mr. Bousquet, you came on late. I give you 30 seconds just
yes,
to say something
in less than that, I would
to the
simply say
Caribbean.
that we need to remember that every single one of these heads of government are political leaders of parties participating in general elections, and the primary lubricant for all of them throughout the 5 years of their terms is being re-elected. So I don't think they're as much as interested in winning regional respect as they are in winning the next national election.
Election. Wow.
True. True
Listen,
that.
partisan politics all the way. That's it for our Caribbean leader, Steve Moore from the UK, saying no politician in the Caribbean is trustworthy. Oh my Lord. As you said, people don't trust them anymore. Well, thank you all so much, gentlemen. It's always a pleasure to have you on. And I always learn something new, and I know my listeners learn something new today. And this is an important topic to discuss. And I thank you for taking the time to be here today. To those of you who are on, thank you so much. 246 Bajan Vibes. To all the listeners there, thank you so much for joining. Those on Caribbean, thank you for joining. And I see you again on Saturday morning at 11 a.m. when we're going to discuss other issues that affect us in the diaspora, both in the Caribbean diaspora as African people in the diaspora. So God bless you. Thank you, Mr. Bousquet.
Okay, Marcia. Until next time.
And Ajamu,
Next
thank
time.
you all so much. God bless. Bye-bye. Love
right,
you
just
all.
go.
See you on Saturday. Bye-bye.
Later.
Bye.